Due to popular demand, I'm back with more Sega Saturn games that cost quite a bit, including some rare games that go for many hundreds of dollars. I have again broken down things into categories, and will also offer some opinions on whether these games are worth their asking prices and offer alternatives where available. I hope you guys enjoy Rare and Expensive Sega Saturn Games Part 2. I was not happy with my Saturn version of Rockman X3 back in the day. It was nearly a straight port of a 16-bit game at full price. It never came to the US, but the PAL version of it, Mega Man X3, goes for a lot of money these days. Loose it's often over $100, and complete in box it can go for nearly $300. None of these games were bad in the strictest sense of the word, but this game is worth nowhere near that kind of money. If you want to play it, buy one of the collections for modern consoles or pick up the Japanese Saturn release. Japanese-only shooters have a long and storied history of high prices on Saturn. Thing is, many of them are great games, so it's hard to argue with the price if there's no other way to play it. Blastwind, however, is a game I do not recommend. This one goes north of $200 quite often, and even loose you'll pay over $100 for it. Thing is, while it isn't a bad game, there are many shoot-em-ups on the Saturn better and cheaper. If you are curious, this is repro or burn fodder for sure. Battlesport was a US exclusive on Saturn. Battlesport costs hundreds of dollars complete. Battlesport is not worth anywhere near that. There are some games people bid up just because not many were made and they want it as a trophy. The fact this game costs this much is indicative of just how crazy some gamers get while collecting old games. Contra Legacy of War was another US exclusive on Saturn. You'll pay over $100 complete for it, but it was not a strong enough game to warrant that kind of money. It's way cheaper on the PlayStation, but if you absolutely must have the Saturn game, go after a disc-only auction and get a custom case. It's much more reasonable that way. Sometimes a game can be deceptively appealing. The colorful graphics of Tri-Rush Deppy lures you into thinking this Japanese exclusive is something special. It's not, and the $200 to $300 price tag on it is just ludicrous in every sense of the word. While nothing here is terrible, there is also nothing here to warrant this kind of pricing. It is a very average game that even loose sells for far too much. Swagman was an overhead adventure game for the Saturn that was only released in Europe. This has driven the price up considerably over the years, and a complete game now goes for around $200 a pop. I actually like this game and it does have something to offer many of you, but just not at this kind of money. This is another one for your repro shelf, and if you want a legit version, it's way cheaper on the PlayStation. I wasn't much of a fan of Mr. Bones, but luckily it's never cost much for me to have to say it's not worth your money. The Japanese version goes for cheap, and the US game goes for around its original retail price. Somehow the European version goes for twice that these days, prompting me to have to speak up here. If you are a big fan of it, stick with the US game, and if you are just curious, the Japanese version is all you need. Either way, this game is not worth over $100. Crows the Battle Action is a Japanese exclusive Saturn beat-em-up that is actually quite cool. I like it, and recommend you all play it, but I certainly do not recommend that you pay current market prices for it. I've seen this game go for $300 at times, and even on the best of days you'll pay well over $2. There are better beat-em-ups on the Saturn for a lot less money, making this another repro for your shelf. Shining Force 3 is an epic strategy RPG with a great story, great graphics, a great soundtrack, and it plays right up there with the best of them. English PAL and US versions sell for well over $100 complete, putting it out of range of a lot of people. However, I have seen disc-only auctions go for well under $100 at times, giving you a chance to call this wonderful game your own. And once you have a legit copy, go after the fan-translated Scenario 2 and 3 on the repro front for the full collection. Dark Savior is a mixed-genre adventure game that is part RPG, part platformer, part one-on-one fighter, and part choose-your-own-story. I love this game's mix of styles, and there is nothing else like it on the Saturn, or any other system from the era. US and PAL versions often go for $50 to $75 complete, and it's worth every penny of that. If that's still a bit too steep, go after loose auctions that can be as little as $25. Likewise, Mystaria goes in the $50 to $75 range. This is a fine RPG strategy game with a great story. It was renamed Blazing Heroes after a brief legal spat with the Dungeons & Dragons owners, and sells for roughly as much as the previous title. This is another one worth every penny of its asking price, and should you go disc only, you can get it even cheaper. Good stuff for fans of the genre. Sometimes a game comes along that just oozes quality, yet is ignored by the community that should love it the most. The Legend of Oasis was a top-down adventure game with RPG elements and lots of exploration for many hours worth of gameplay. It doesn't play as smoothly as something like Zelda, but the combat is more satisfying, and the audio and visual presentation are at times nothing short of breathtaking. Complete prices put it near $100. And I'd say it's worth that all day long, but loose it can go for less than half that. Warriors of Fate is a great multiplayer beat-em-up that hovers around the $100 mark depending on your love of spine cards. It is quite the solid game, and I'd give it my recommendation even at that price for your Saturn library. Should you want it cheaper, a PlayStation port exists as well, and is often half the price. Do you like tits and ass on your Saturn for no other reason than it exists? Well, then you may enjoy the Playboy Karaoke Collection Volumes 1 and 2. Naked chicks to sing along with. What more could you possibly want? And these will only sit you back around $100 per disc. Seriously fellas, if this kind of thing piques your curiosity, burn a copy, spend a few minutes with it, and move on. These prices are a joke. I've been appreciating Japanese culture since I was a kid. but even I had to drop a what the hell when I saw Steam Hearts. The story here is simple enough. Your world has been infected by a virus that has turned all of its female guardians into crazed lunatics. Your job is to defeat these female guardians and then, wait for it, pump your semen into them to cure their craziness. No shit, man, the story here is to beat down women and have sex with them so they can be made whole again. Best part is that this one can be yours for the low price of just $200 or so. Believe it or not, there are more explicit versions of this game out there, and while it is fairly good, the price is just something I cannot recommend. Burn it or grab a repro.
Lego.
Choa Nikki made its way to the Saturn as well. Lots of dude-related visuals here. Muscle dudes to be more specific. Sometimes things are going on that I have no clue what to think. Choa Nikki for the Saturn really isn't all that expensive, typically around the $50 or so area, but it certainly is truly strange. In fact, for raw visual impact, I doubt there is a weirder game on the platform. I am often approached by Saturn fans looking for ways to play great games cheaply. Well, if you want to play Resident Evil on the Saturn and avoid that $100 price tag associated with the US release, you have two choices. Go after the PAL version or pick up the Japanese version called Biohazard. Both of these regions are cheaper and easier to get. For those curious about the Japanese version, the story is entirely in spoken English, and only a few puzzles present any difficulty due to Japanese text. It's still very playable.
Barry!
Jill, what's going on? Any clues?
No, but something's wrong with this house.
Sonic Jam contains the Sega Genesis Sonic titles all in one compilation, as well as a bunch of art, cinemas, and music from the universe. You also get a good look at 3D Sonic on the Saturn had Sonic Team done the honors from the beginning. The US game tends to sell for over $100 complete, but the PAL version is cheaper and the Japanese version is cheaper still. Since there is no story to speak of here, an alternative version is more than acceptable to save you some cash. Both the PAL and US versions of Die Hard Arcade sell for nearly $100 complete these days. You can often get this great 3D beat-em-up for less than $30 in its Japanese form. There it's called Dynamite Deca, but it's otherwise very much the same game. Galaxy Fight was a decent 2D fighter on the Saturn. The PAL version of it can go for around $100 complete, and the US version typically over $50 complete. I've seen the Japanese version go for under $20 from time to time, making it the version of choice. Somehow the US version of Super Puzzle Fighter 2 has been getting up there in price recently, close to $100 at times complete. Do not be duped into paying this price when you can get the Japanese game for under $30 with a bit of patience. The PAL version is cheaper as well. I am a fan of Darius Gaiden. It's such a good looking, sounding, and playing shooter, and the Saturn version is a great port of it. But over the years, the US release has gotten up to around the $80 mark, a price that is simply not worth when you can get the Japanese version for as little as $30. As a bonus, the Japanese box art is better too. Hyper Duel. We all know it, we all love it, and it is a AAA shooter experience and one of my favorites on the Saturn. It's got everything you need, great graphics and sound, excellent gameplay, and it even has a Saturn mode that changes a bunch of things around. It's up there with some of the best of the genre, and frankly, the Saturn version does the arcade all sorts of justice. As a Saturn owner, you don't just want it, you need it in your collection. The problem? It's a freaking $500 game. Yep, you're gonna need a repro of this beauty. Saturn RPGs are among the most underappreciated games when talking about the genre. Usually you have people going apeshit with praise for systems like the Super Nintendo and PlayStation, yet the Saturn had games that I would call some of the best. Magic Knight Rayearth was one such action-adventure RPG. Its beautiful hand-drawn graphics, fantastic soundtrack, and truly appealing characters all made it a great experience. If you even remotely enjoy these types of games, I recommend it all day long. Of course, the US version saw a super small run, which has led the game to selling for $400 to $500 or more complete. You can play this game nowhere else, so find yourself a good repro and be sure to take that adventure. Sonic Team's Burning Rangers was such a unique game. I mean, you just didn't see futuristic firefighters in games too often, and the gameplay hook was hella cool. It has great fire effects, environments that would change and deteriorate on you, and a fully voiced story to keep you interested. Like most of the games released in 1998 in the US, it was a small run, so it sells for lots of money today. You are looking at $300 or more for this one, and even loose it's still really high. Luckily the PAL version can go for around $100, and the Japanese version for half that. The story matters here, so I advise sticking to a version you can understand. And of course, the granddaddy of coveted Sega Saturn games, Panzer Dragoon Saga. Perhaps the most popular game on the Saturn today, there are those of you that easily consider this the system's best game. It's a unique combination of action, RPG, and strategy game, and has a really good story backing it up. The US version was dropped along with the other 1998 titles and again saw a limited run. Combined with its popularity as a great game, this has created a perfect storm that has seen its price rise steadily over the last 10 years, and it's rapidly closing in on $1,000 for a complete game. You can get it for around the $600 to $800 mark currently depending on condition. PAL versions go for half that complete, and if you are willing to work with a walkthrough, the Japanese version is dirt cheap and almost always under 50 bucks. Game pricing is a funny thing these days. You have people that are part of the collecting scene who are all in for paying whatever the hell they need to obtain the games they want. Then you have those that love the games but don't own a single legitimate piece of software, completely going the emulation and repro route. Then you have those gamers like me, who try and balance the hobby by buying what they can sensibly and then turning to alternative means when necessary. I have a feeling that actually covers the bulk of you. We have collectively come to the conclusion that it's okay not to own every good game under the sun. We realized long ago that a massive collection does not equal a quality collection. And perhaps most importantly, we understand that just because you can buy a high-priced game doesn't mean you should. I'll leave you with this opinion on the hobby of video game collecting. The only person that can victimize you today with high game prices is yourself. You make the choice to pay those prices. You make the choice to support the nonsense that keeps those prices going up. And you make the choice to obsess over things that almost always have other means to enjoy them. If you pay $1,000 for a fucking video game, there is no one to blame but yourself. I'm Sega Lord X. Thank you guys for watching, and I will catch you next time.